Have you ever wondered why America can print so much money and somehow not collapse? Because in most countries, that story ends badly. Print too much, the currency weakens, prices rise, confidence falls, and sooner or later, the bill comes due. But America sits inside a different kind of system. Even when debt explodes, even when money floods the economy, even when oil shocks hit the world, the dollar somehow stays at the center of everything. And that leads to the real machinery of American power. America's power was never just about tanks, troops, or even GDP. It came from building a system where the world needs US dollars to buy the one thing modern economies cannot function without: oil. That system is the petrodollar. And once you understand it, you understand why America can print more, borrow more, sanction more, and still keep the rest of the world orbiting around the dollar. Before you can understand the petrodollar, you have to understand one simple thing. Oil is what moves the world. Yeah, it powers cars, trucks, planes, and cargo ships. Everybody knows that. But oil is also inside plastic, fertilizer, chemicals, packaging, synthetic clothing, and even the broader system that grows, moves, and delivers your food. Which is why when oil gets expensive, everyday life gets more expensive too. Oil doesn't just power your car, it quietly prices your life. And that is what makes it different. A country can be bad at making phones, it can be bad at making luxury goods, but a modern economy without reliable energy, that is a disaster. Now, zoom out. Not every country has oil, but every serious economy needs it. Japan, Europe, India, China, all of them. And once the thing everybody needs gets tied to money, this stops being just a commodity story. It becomes a power story. Because at that point, the real question is no longer who has the oil, it is who controls the currency used to buy it. And that is where the whole petrodollar story begins. Now go back to 1944. While World War II was still raging, America was already in a position almost nobody else could match. Europe had been devastated by years of war. Japan was being pounded in the Pacific and pushed deeper into a desperate defensive fight. But America, its factories were still intact. Its economy was surging on wartime production, and it held an enormous share of the world's gold. That gave Washington something no other country really had at that moment: the power to shape the rules of the post-war financial system. So in July 1944, at Bretton Woods, 44 nations met to build a new global monetary order. The arrangement was simple, but incredibly powerful. The dollar would sit at the center, it would be tied to gold, and other major currencies would be tied to the dollar. In other words, the world was now being rebuilt around the US currency. And for a while, it worked beautifully. But by the late 1960s, the math was getting ugly. America was spending heavily at home and abroad, especially on the Vietnam War. There were now far more dollars floating around the world than gold sitting in US vaults to back them up. Foreign governments noticed. Confidence started to slip. Then came the break. In 1971, Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. That was the Nixon shock. Overnight, the old system basically lost its anchor. The dollar was now a fiat currency, valuable only because people believed in it, trusted it, and kept accepting it. That should have been a major problem, because the obvious question was now impossible to ignore. Why should the rest of the world keep trusting the dollar? Then, history handed Washington a new opportunity. In 1973, the oil crisis exploded. After Arab oil producers embargoed countries backing Israel during the Yom Kippur War, oil prices surged, markets panicked, and the global economy got hammered. Suddenly, oil was the lifeblood of the modern world. If energy stopped flowing, everything else started breaking. That's when Washington leaned into a new arrangement with Saudi Arabia, the most powerful player in oil. The understanding was simple but hugely consequential. Saudi oil would continue to be priced in dollars, and Saudi surplus revenues would be recycled into dollar-based assets like US treasuries. In return, the kingdom got military support, weapons, and security backing from the United States. Saudi was already the heavyweight in global oil markets, so other producers gradually moved in the same direction. That was the real pivot. The dollar was no longer tied to gold. It was tied to the thing every industrial economy had to keep buying: energy. And once oil trade started running through the dollar, the US did not just save the currency. It built a new kind of built-in demand for it. Which means the real story is not just how the dollar survived, it is how this system kept sending power, money, and leverage back to the United States. Here's the part most people never get taught. The real power of the petrodollar system is not just that oil is sold in US dollars. The real power is what every country has to do before it can even buy the oil in the first place. Think about a country like Japan or South Korea. They need energy, a lot of it, but they cannot just show up and pay in yen or won and expect the global oil market to accept it. First, they need dollars. That means they have to earn them through exports, borrow them, hold them in reserves, or move through dollar-based financial channels. Then you get to the second half of the system, the part most people never think about. What happens to all those dollars after oil producers receive them? A large share does not just sit still. It gets recycled back into the financial system, especially into US assets like treasury bonds, banks, real estate, stocks, and other dollar-based investments. That is what people mean by petrodollar recycling. So the system works like a loop. Countries need dollars to buy oil, oil exporters receive those dollars, and a significant portion of that money flows back into the United States. That is what made the whole system so powerful. America was not just participating in global trade, it was sitting at the center of a financial circuit that kept reinforcing itself. That constant return flow helped Washington finance its deficits more easily, prop up its financial markets, and keep the dollar embedded deep inside the global economy. Once you sit at the center of a loop like that, you do not just get convenience, you get leverage. Now, I already know what a lot of people are thinking. If this system is so great, why does life still feel more expensive? That's a fair question. Now, think of it like this. If the dollar is the world's default fuel card, America is the company that issues the card. That means Washington can spend more recklessly, borrow more easily, and print more money without getting hit as fast as everyone else. In most countries, that kind of behavior blows up quickly. Their currency tanks. Imports get crushed. Inflation goes feral. America gets more slack. Not infinite slack, but way more slack. And lately, you have probably been seeing the other side of that, right? More debt, more money printing, more asset bubbles. More moments where you look around and think, how is this whole thing not breaking already? This is how. The world keeps needing dollars. The world keeps buying US debt. So America gets to keep rolling the bill forward. And that's just the money side. The darker part is control. Because if global trade runs through your currency, then you get a giant off switch, freeze assets, block payments, cut countries out of the system. You do not always need to send troops when you can crash somebody's economy from a conference room. That's why sanctions hit so hard. And let's be honest, this system was never protected by economics alone. It had muscle behind it, military alliances, arms deals, political pressure, a giant invisible sign that said, this system is not optional. But here's the twist nobody likes talking about. This helped the American state a lot more than it helped the average American worker. You've probably felt that too. Factories leave, Wall Street gets richer, houses become investment vehicles, everything turns into debt, fees, and monthly payments. America gets the privilege. Regular people get the bill. So yes, this system gave America extraordinary power. But it also helped create the version of America people are frustrated with right now. Expensive, financialized, and constantly running on borrowed money. And that raises the real question. If this system gives America so much power, what happens if the rest of the world starts finding ways around it? But can the system actually break? Yes, just not through one dramatic headline and a YouTube thumbnail screaming, "The dollar is dead." This kind of system usually does not collapse in one big moment. It gets weaker at the edges first, and you can already see that happening. Russia and China are not overthrowing the dollar, but they are trying to build around it, using more non-dollar payment channels, settling more trade outside the usual US-controlled rails, and slowly reducing how exposed they are to a system Washington can weaponize. That does not sound dramatic, but that's the point. Big systems usually do not die from one punch. They get chipped away. You can even see that pressure show up in places like Hormuz. During the recent crisis, reports emerged that Iran was considering letting a limited number of oil tankers through only if the oil was traded in Chinese yuan instead of US dollars. Whether or not moves like that scale up, the signal is obvious. Some countries are actively looking for ways to push energy trade outside the dollar system. Still, here's the part that frustrates America's rivals. Replacing the dollar is hard, really hard, because the dollar is still the easiest system for moving huge amounts of money. It has the deepest liquidity, the biggest pool of supposedly safe assets, and a legal financial infrastructure the rest of the world already knows how to use. Trying to replace it is like telling everyone to leave the busiest airport in the world and start flying through a half-built terminal across town. In theory, sure. In practice, good luck. And the bigger long-term threat may be even simpler than geopolitics. If oil becomes less central, the petrodollar becomes less central too. More EVs, more renewables, more nuclear, less oil sitting in the middle of everyday economic life. That alone will not kill the system. But it does weaken the old automatic link between energy demand and dollar demand. So the most likely future is not some clean Hollywood-style collapse. It's a slower shift into a messier world. More side deals, more regional payment systems, more non-dollar trade, and a dollar that is still dominant, just not quite as untouchable as it once was. And that leaves the real question open. Is the petrodollar dying, or is it just changing into the next version of American power? So the petrodollar was never just a money story. It was a system that let America export dollars and import power. So here's what I want to ask you. Do you feel like this system has benefited your life, or have you mostly paid for it? Let me know in the comments. And if this video helped you see the system behind the headlines, hit like so, more people actually find it. And subscribe if you want more videos that explain power, money, and geopolitics without the usual BS.